Have you ever looked back at a relationship and thought, where did I go? Or maybe you're still in this relationship, and when you look back to the beginning of it, you realize that you used to have your own voice, you used to have your own needs, your own opinions, but somewhere along the way, all of that got quieter until you could barely hear yourself at all. If you feel like you easily lose yourself in love, or if you've lost yourself in your current relationship, then this video is for you. Hi, I'm Madalena, and this is You Reclaimed. Around here, we talk about how childhood trauma and emotional chaos and dysregulation and old survival patterns show up in our adult relationships so that we can finally break free and show up as our full selves. Stick around because at the end of this video, I'm going to share a few simple ways that you can start coming back to yourself, even if you're still in a relationship that feels a little bit hard to navigate. Let's get into it. Wait, did you subscribe yet? I have a lot more to share and I'd love to have you here for it. It really helps my channel grow and I appreciate it so much. So why do you start to shapeshift in your relationships? For a lot of us, losing ourselves in a relationship is not something that starts with the other person demanding that we change. Instead, it starts with a quiet voice inside of us, a voice that whispers all kinds of doubts. Doubts like, maybe I'm not lovable. Maybe I won't be accepted for who I am. Maybe they'll leave if I dare to show up as myself. And that voice is not coming from our partner. That's rarely the case. This voice is much older than that. It's a familiar voice that we've been carrying with us for years. And it's one that usually goes all the way back to our childhood. And it comes from the earliest relationships we had, relationships with our parents, with our caregivers, or even from chaotic early friendships that left deep indents, deep marks on us. And what do all of these old dynamics have in common? Well, they taught us that love, it comes with some very real conditions. Conditions that we have to fulfill to receive love and receive affection and care. And because this voice inside of us reflects our earliest ideas of love, we are very, very much attuned to it because it's been with us for such a long time. And after carrying it for so many years, we can safely say that this voice is our internal blueprint for love, for what love feels like, for what it looks like in our minds. It's a map that we unconsciously follow when it comes to connection to other people, when it comes to the way we attach to other people, and to what makes us feel safe in a relationship. And as adults, without even realizing it, we're still following that voice's directions. And what does this old voice inside of us want? Well, its only job is really to keep us safe. And in relationships with other people, it wants us to behave in a way that protects us from emotional harm. Unfortunately, the best way it knows how to do that is to help us stay hyper attuned to what the other person wants so that we can avoid conflict, so that we can anticipate the other person's moods, anticipate what the other person needs. And so that we can try to smooth things over the very, very second that something threatens our connection with someone we love. This is what psychologists often refer to as fawning, which is one of the 4 classic trauma responses alongside fight, flight, and freeze. Fawning is when we do our best to keep other people happy because deep down, we believe that their happiness equals our safety. And over time, fawning becomes so automatic that we don't even realize we're doing it anymore. We just know that we feel incredibly anxious when someone is upset with us, or when we have to say no, or when we want to choose ourselves instead of going along with what the other person wants. Even something as simple as having needs can make us feel selfish or guilty. Let me give you an example of how this has shown up in my own life. For a large part of my adult life, I had almost zero tolerance for unresolved conflict. Any kind of disagreement, even a small one, would completely dysregulate me. So let's say my husband and I had a minor argument. He would stay calm and take some time to think it through and try to come to a resolution slowly and rationally because, well, that's how he was used to doing things. Coincidentally, it's also what secure attachment looks like, but I couldn't sit in that silence. To me, the silence meant that something dangerous might happen, that he might quietly decide he didn't like me anymore, or that he didn't love me, or that he was pulling away from me, that he might reject me or abandon me. Just the thought that someone I loved could be even mildly disapproving of me, to me it felt unbearable. It tormented me. And why would I feel this way with a securely attached husband who's never given me any indication that he might be aggressive or violent or pose any kind of threat to me? Well, because my own original love blueprint is based on my own childhood environment. And my childhood had my father at the forefront, who was deeply and chronically dysregulated himself, and whose emotional reactions were completely and utterly unpredictable and baffling to me as a child. So to me, growing up, what I knew is that any mild conflict could escalate into just about anything. So I learned very early on to diffuse other people. I learned that the safest thing you can do when someone else is upset is to read them as well as you can so that you can diffuse them like you would diffuse a bomb. So in my adult relationships, what did I do? I pushed for immediate resolution to anything and everything. I needed things fixed right now, even if the conversation didn't call for that. Even if my urgency didn't fit the situation at all, but I needed things to go back to safe mode as soon as possible. That's how fawning can look. It's not just about being overly nice. It can also be about urgently performing or demanding peace, because the idea of someone being upset with us, it feels like a threat to our entire sense of safety. And well, it usually comes from somewhere. So how do you know if you might be abandoning yourself in relationships? Here are a few subtle signs that sneak in quietly to let you know that you're starting to disconnect from yourself. 1, you defer to the other person for almost every decision that needs to be made. Anything from dinner plans to big life goals. 2, you apologize for things that are not even your fault just to keep the peace and to avoid any kind of disagreement. You stop pursuing your own hobbies, you stop talking to your own friends, you stop following the routines that used to make up your day. And it's not because your partner is asking you to do any of this. It feels easier and more comfortable for you to sort of blend yourself into their life rather than doing your own thing. You can find yourself thinking, I just want them to be happy, but you forget to ask, am I happy here? Am I satisfied with the way I'm living? A friend of mine told me once that after 3 years of being with her husband, she'd realized something. She had not made a single playlist. This is a woman who lives for music. She hadn't cooked a single one of her favorite meals, hadn't listened to any podcast by herself, and she used to be obsessed with a long list of podcasts before she met her husband. And it wasn't her husband's fault. He never asked her to give any of that up. She just slowly defaulted to his life and didn't even realize that she had quietly sort of stepped out of her own life altogether. Compromises like this might seem harmless at first, but over time they build resentment because they leave us feeling exhausted. And it's because we're essentially living someone else's life. And eventually that leaves us with a deep and quiet ache just to be seen, even by ourselves, right? Studies on the science of self-abandonment, and specifically research on attachment and on emotional neglect, they show us something really interesting. That people who've experienced insecure attachments in early childhood, they're far more likely to suppress their own emotions and their own needs so that they can preserve their adult relationships later in life. And honestly, it makes perfect sense. If your earliest blueprint taught you that love disappears the moment you're too much or too needy or too loud or too emotional, then keeping yourself small and insignificant and out of the way, it feels like it's in your best interest. It feels like the safest thing you can do. But the thing with that is that emotional safety should not require you to shrink in that way. It shouldn't need you to disappear, because you don't actually disappear. You have nowhere to go. You just move underneath the surface and you become resentful and lonely and lost. So how do we start to reclaim ourselves and to come back to ourselves if we tend to lose ourselves in this way? The good news is that you don't need to make huge dramatic shifts overnight. But what is required are small moments of awareness and a little bit of courage to actually take steps and act on them. So here are a few steps you can try. 1, pause before you say yes. Before you agree to something, take a breath and ask yourself, is this something I actually want to do? Or am I doing it because I'm trying to avoid some sort of discomfort for saying no, right? Discomfort at having the other person look at me after I've set a boundary, after I've said no. Because sometimes the discomfort of just sitting with ourselves in these moments is the hardest part. We often give in to other people's needs or demands because we don't want to tolerate that temporary discomfort. It's such a small practice, but it starts to rebuild your inner sense of trust and confidence. 2, revisit your own preferences. Make a me list. Write down things that you used to love before the relationship. If this is your first relationship, try brainstorming a list of 30 things you could do on your own, things that belong just to you. You don't even have to do them all. Just imagine them. Visualize yourself in those moments doing those things and just try to imagine how that feels. Sometimes even picturing yourself doing something is enough to awaken your curiosity. You can think about foods, about music, shows you'd like to see, beliefs of your own, values, creative outlets that you'd like to explore, and try them on privately, even in your mind to start with, or try them on in practice if you can. Like trying on a jacket to see how it fits on you. Because the truth is that your world is still yours, and you are an individual regardless of the relationships you form with other people, even when you love someone. 3, practice low stakes boundaries. Say no to things, even small things. Say no to something small, even if it feels awkward at first. You don't need some sort of dramatic confrontation. Just try something simple like, actually, I'd rather do something different today, or I think I'd like to think about that first. Because every time you stand by a boundary, you teach your nervous system that it is safe for me to take up space. You don't have to disappear in any way to be loved. If you've lost yourself in a relationship, I want you to know that it's not a sign of weakness on your part. It's a part of an old survival mechanism, and it's something that your nervous system learned to do to stay safe and to feel connected. And it's the best way it knew how to do that at the time. But now as an adult, you have a chance to ask yourself something different. What would it look like to connect to yourself first? Would that change how you show up in love? Could you then share that, what you've built within yourself, with your partner, with someone else? If any of this sounds like you, if you tend to lose track of yourself when you fall in love or when you get comfortable in a relationship, let me know in the comments. I want to hear your story. And if it helped you connect the dots for yourself, consider subscribing so we can keep doing this together. See you in the next one.